Sir, that was surely a value-adding talk. The keynote speaker of today's conference, Dr. I M Pandey, currently holds the position of Director General at Vivekananda Institute of Professional Studies. Earlier, he was a professor at Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, for more than 27 years, where he also served as professor and dean. He has taught at Kansas State University, USA, ESSEC and ESCP, France, University of Birmingham, UK, University of Science Malaysia, and also in Vietnam, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh. He was also member of the board of directors of Indorama Polymer Limited, Thailand, Industrial Finance Corporation of India, Cochin Shipyard Company, IDBI Principal Mutual Fund, Ahmedabad Stock Exchange, Gujarat Chemicals, Hindustan Petroleum Company, and IDBI's Western Region Advisory Board. He was also the member of the Controller of Capital Issues Advisory Committee. I would now like to request Dr. I M Pandey to throw more light on the topic.
Good morning. Shri Jaipuria ji, Dr. Pamidua, Mr. Nanda, Dr. Mahapatra, distinguished guests, colleagues from academic institutions and students. It's a great pleasure for me to be here among you, the distinguished speakers. In fact, being the last speaker, you have an advantage. Whatever you wanted to say has already been said. In fact, Dr. Dua, she made such a comprehensive presentation that I was wondering that what is that which I am going to add. Therefore, the challenge for me is to re-paraphrase what she said in such a way that it looks new to you. Well, I think the concern of all of us is that how we remove poverty. When we talk about economic development and then we try to relate it to financial inclusion, perhaps what is in the back of mind is that being a poor nation, how do we bring these people who are marginalized into the mainstream? Of course, poverty is the worst form of violence. That's what Mahatma Gandhi said long ago. And Charles Darwin, he says, if the misery of the poor be caused not by the laws of nature, but by our institutions, great is our sin. Poverty anywhere is threat to prosperity everywhere. I think that's the motivating factor for the policy changes which are being introduced by governments one after another. What is financial inclusion? I'm not going to talk about that, but I would certainly say that, look, it's a must because it brings the low-income groups within the perimeters of the formal banking and financial system, and therefore it helps to protect their wealth. It also mitigates the exploitation of vulnerable sections of the population. How do we measure it? Because Dr. Pamidua mentioned about the Reserve Bank policies and the schemes which have been implemented and which are going to be implemented. I think access is the first thing, making it available. Of course, Mr. Nanda also mentioned that, for example, we have a comprehensive network of postal system. Perhaps that if we add that too with the banking system, along with other financial institutions, so access could be made possible to everyone in this country. So access is the one, which is to begin with the number of accounts, for example. Not only the number of accounts, but as a proportion of the population. That's why Reserve Bank of India has those kinds of policies that you would like to have a bank wherever the population is 2,000 and so. But more important is the quality. How does it affect the quality of the people? For example, the financial inclusion. It's not simply churning out the numbers. I will also give you some statistics that what has gone over the years in this country. The lifestyle of the customer should change, as a matter of fact. Okay? Opening account is one thing, but then to ensure that they are being used, permanence and depth of financial services and products is important. Because if we make some kind of analysis, then we may find that a large number of these accounts are not operated actually. Okay? Even in the urban areas, I think we find these kinds of non-operating accounts, because time and again we get messages from banks, okay, State Bank of India or even Citibank or Standard Chartered, that you have not operated your account for last several months. The impact is important, as I said that, and therefore there is a need to continuously measure and monitor the levels of financial inclusion. And we need to deepen our understanding about the factors that correlate with the financial inclusion. Now, it's very important to notice that worldwide there is financial exclusion actually. In spite of whatever developments have been taking place over the last several years, what we find is that the absolute number of savings accounts are much more than the global population. Okay, the accounts, because we open multiple accounts actually. But in spite of all that, half of the world's aggregate population, which is approximately 2.5 billion, does not have access to savings account and other formal services. Worldwide, 2.5 billion. CRISIL's Financial Inclusion Index actually, and they include 3 parameters there: the branch penetration, deposit penetration, and credit penetration. So the 3 elements have been put together to calculate the financial inclusion index. And of course, the data is a little old, but what they thought that it's only, look at the unbanked population of India, it's estimated around 45%, 47%. Maybe one of the estimates I was reading, it would say 42%, for example. Now, worldwide, a lot of initiatives were taken. Again, to quote Dr. Pamidua, she mentioned about our priority sector, for example, but it was worldwide, in fact. There was what we call, it's around 18s actually, directed credit to farmers, small. So it was not free flow for the, unfortunately, in spite of that loss to the in performance and productivity, it didn't go to the rural areas, the unbanked population. Therefore, this program was found to be unsustainable. And the focus shifted from there to performance of the financial institutions. So it was not simply the number, the quantity. What was important is that whether it has been delivered or not. And in the process, in many countries, including India, for example, there were successful initial experiences in services like microfinance, rural finance, etc., etc. Of course, a lot of policy initiatives have been taken in India. Just to give you a snapshot, it's from Reserve Bank of India Bulletin actually, okay, that what has happened between, let's say, 2000 and 2020 has gone to 5,86,000. Urban location, BCs, business correspondents, for example, from 414, it has increased to 1,02,500. Similarly, basic savings banking deposit account from 73 million has increased to 348 billion. Small farm credit has also increased 5,130 billion. So we find that in terms of quantitative numbers, there is tremendous progress which has been made to have this financial inclusion, but there are problems actually. Again, Reserve Bank itself points out those problems. For example, low volume of transactions in this basic savings account, for example. VCs are quite inactive actually. Half of them are not performing. There is inaccessibility of the bank facilities in number remote areas. Of course, I come from the hill areas, Uttarakhand, and I know that it's very difficult to have branches everywhere in the villages because the villages are very small at some places. Maybe that 6 or 7 or 10 families, that's one village. Of course, we were talking about technology, but then there is this problem of poor connectivity. I think what we need to focus on perhaps as a strategy is that suitable products, committed people will have to be offered to different target groups of the society. Okay? We have to divide society into certain target groups, and suitable products will have to be developed for each of the target groups. We have small and marginal farmers, we have micro and small enterprises, then we have low income, we have no income earners. Okay? Of course, financial inclusion of not great help to them. So we have existing institutions which are excluded. There are certain institutions which are not included for the time being in this, have new ones as well. Of course, Mr. Nanda expanded quite a lot on the digital technology and financial inclusion and what efforts are being made on their part. Similarly, Dr. Pamido also mentioned the importance of this digital technology. I would only simply like to point out that this is being harnessed in a big way in many countries, many developing countries. For example, in Kenya, nearly 2/3 of the adults are active customers of a mobile phone-based money transfer and payment service. This is 20% in Bangladesh and almost 50% in Tanzania. When it comes to India, for example, Mr. Shishir's mobile money in this country. Okay. Which means that we have a daunting task. We have challenges. Now, and I would like to talk about financial inclusion and the financial stability, for example. Again, previous speakers have talked about the financial literacy, which is quite important. Therefore, in fact, there would be 3 elements. These are 3 elements of integral strategy. Financial inclusion, as was pointed out earlier, it works from the supply side. It's of financial services offered by banks and other financial institutions. Now the question is that going forward, can it bring financial stability? In the literature, there is a lot of discussion on the relationship between financial development, economic growth, reduction in income equality, and poverty. Development leads to economic growth, reduces income inequality, and helps to reduce poverty. Their studies indicate. I'll come back to India, what is happening in India. So, it is financial depth which they're talking about, as a matter of fact. So, when we talk about, they're not talking about financial breadth. We are talking about financial breadth. When we talk about financial inclusion, we want to expand that. So, in case of financial depth, the important measurement, the supply of credit as a percentage of your GDP, for example. This can be used as a measure. And then you try to see the impact on the economic growth. So there is a positive relationship between these two. Of course, earlier days, as a student, I remember that we used to debate. We had this econometric problem of which one is exogenous, which is endogenous variable, for example, whether it's economic development which leads to financial development, or is it financial development which leads to economic development. But more or less now people are saying that financial development is essential in order to have economic development. But then it takes care of the financial depth, not breadth. Now, financial inclusion, does it lead to financial stability? First thing is that it's difficult to define financial stability because it's multidimensional. you have large number of different institutions, you have markets, you see. So there is interplay of these elements when it comes to the financial stability. Assuming that we can define it, then does financial inclusion introduce stability in the market? Now, financial inclusion, what does it do? Actually, it changes the composition of transactions, clients, risk, and many new institutions appear there. Okay, so this entire gamut of the financial system gets changed. Now, what you are doing is that you are including the lower income people in the fold. When we are doing this financial inclusion, so-called complete financial inclusion, would it introduce instability or stability? I think we can conjecture, perhaps. What perhaps may be said that as far as the idiosyncratic risk is concerned, it would be there. Otherwise also, whenever you say that system is stable, some kind of failures always take place. Okay? It's a question of large-scale failure taking place. Even the large banks crumbling down, for example. Then it's very systematic. So systematic risk is unlikely to increase because of financial inclusion. Mostly what may happen is that it would be idiosyncratic. Now according to Jean-Claude Trichet, he is the president of European Bank, for example, he said that it will bring stability, and he gives 3 reasons. If 3 conditions are satisfied, for example, financial stability is made of 3 factors: the amount and quality of information available to players, okay, the adequacy, inadequacy of the frameworks of crisis prevention and resolution, and the level of completeness of the market. If this happens, he says that financial stability will be ensured even if you have complete financial inclusion, 100% financial inclusion. I think the customer base would be enlarged and there would be greater social and political stability. Because of that, economy may become stable. Growth with equity so far. All right. Actually, there is an IMF study, and it says that Asian countries are unable to replicate the growth with equity miracle, and pointed out that inequality has also increased in past 2.5 decades, lowering the effectiveness of growth to combat poverty and preventing the building of a substantial middle class. Now what's happening in India? One measure of income inequality in economics is the Gini Coefficient. It's a dispersion of income. Okay? And when we talk about the dispersion of income, we calculate this Gini Coefficient. Now higher the Gini Coefficient means more inequality. It should be lower therefore. Alright? So, what are the studies? These are World Bank and IMF studies, for example. Maybe Indians have also done, but I couldn't find them out. The Gini coefficient in India went from 43. You can put it 0.43 if you make it 1 as the or 100. So it went from 43 in 95, 96 to 45 in 2004 and 5. And according to World Bank, it was 34 in 2009. But interestingly, in 1990 it was 45 and it went up to 51 in 2013. So what are we trying to say? That income inequalities are increasing in India in spite of whatever efforts we have made so far. Of course, there are related studies that you go beyond financial inclusion and you talk about the income distribution and taxation system in the country. Okay? India has been criticized to have low direct taxes. Low direct taxes. Right? Because, and all of us know the data, but how many of us are paying taxes. So therefore, I'm saying it's a very daunting task. You have to keep in mind when we are talking about economic development or growth with equity. Financial inclusion itself will not ensure that growth with equity. Therefore, many other steps will have to be taken. So the policy has to be a highly concerted policy actually. It has to be related to other aspects of this. Much has been talked about financial literacy and the advantages of financial. From academic point of view, I would simply like to say that there are many connotations of financial literacy. There are many related terms which are used, and therefore we get confused. Economic literacy, consumer literacy, financial capability, financial knowledge, financial skills, various kinds of terms are being used. Perhaps even the definition of financial literacy could be more contextual. It may differ from one country to another. Now, some of my students have done some study on financial literacy, and from the literature, what we found is that there is not single definition of financial literacy. There are constructs of financial literacy. Therefore, even from the research point of view, your methodology would change actually. Perhaps it's the structural equation model which you may have to use when you talk about the constructs within one particular concept. And even World Bank and other agencies, they are saying it's a dynamic kind of a concept. It's evolving, and we need to understand what financial literacy really means. So that, now for example, as was mentioned by Dr. Dua, that Reserve Bank of India, the focus is on financial literacy now because people don't understand even the basic terms. Now, studies have been conducted so far, including in India actually, and one of the studies which one of my students, PhD student, did, that it's very low. The financial literacy, whatever way you define, is very low. The survey was urban areas, North India, and that was a survey sample, of course. You select sample, proper statistical processes were being used to select the sample to be financially literate in urban areas. If that is the state of affairs, maybe that perhaps the study had its own limitations, even if you say that it's 70%, for example, okay, in urban areas, we can understand what would be the situation in the rural areas. So the implications are serious, and therefore I think on the demand side, the efforts will have to be made in skilling people, in making people to understand that what products are being offered to them, why they are being offered to them. Along with the financial literacy, I think the consumer protection is important. This was again mentioned, this point, so there is nothing new about it. The only thing which I would like to say is that we are very poor on this front actually. And our consumer protection, we have some laws somewhere. But now what we mean by consumer protection when it comes to the financial inclusion is that the consumer should receive accurate, simple, comparable information of a financial service or product before and after buying it. Consumers should have access to expedient, inexpensive and efficient mechanism of dispute resolution with financial institutions. Consumers should be able to receive financial education when and how they want it. I think we are perhaps way behind in these, and a lot of efforts will have to be done. So just to put it together and conclude, therefore, what we are saying is financial inclusion is critical. Financial exclusion means more poverty, for example, but financial inclusion does not necessarily mean that there would be growth with equity unless we put more efforts. Technology, I think, has a lot of potential to spread financial inclusion in this country, which has to be properly used. The use of mobile, as I said, for banking purposes is very, very limited in this country so far. So it's a daunting task, and there should be a policy to ensure that phones are that the people feel confident. Okay, they have to be made literate to use phones. Connectivity will have to be ensured, for example, and then they have to have the confidence in using these phones. So technology can be highly disruptive kind of weapon to improve your financial inclusion spread. I think it is our responsibility as academicians to do good research and bring their conclusion to the government and the policymakers so that policies could be further improved. Thank you very much.